What's up, cool people? I'm a little sick, so sorry for a bunch of coughing and such in the next few Bible study videos. Alrighty. So we've got Numbers chapter 18 lined up. I realized in a couple of previous chapters I wound up mistakenly saying Leviticus in some moments. My apologies for that. We are in Numbers, not Leviticus. So anyway, Numbers chapter 18, previous events. There was kind of a rebellion against Moses and the leadership, and that got struck down via, a earthquake swallowing up a bunch of the people that were leading said rebellion, but also by, just fire coming from God and consuming the rest of the people who were involved in that. Long story short, God pretty much solidified Moses as the chosen leader of the people and Aaron as, the chosen high priest. So anyway, then we get, speaking of, priests and what all they're supposed to do, that seems to be what this chapter is going to be about. So, Numbers, chapter 18. Then the Lord said to Aaron, "You, your sons, and your relatives from the tribe of Levi will be held responsible for any offenses related to the sanctuary. But you and your sons alone will be held responsible for violations connected with the priesthood. Bring your relatives of the tribe of Levi, your ancestral tribe, to assist you and your sons as you perform the sacred duties in front of the Tabernacle of the Covenant. But as the Levites go about all their assigned duties at the Tabernacle, they must be careful not to go near any of the sacred objects or the altar. If they do, both you and they will die. The Levites must join you in fulfilling their responsibilities for the care and maintenance of the Tabernacle, but no unauthorized person may assist you." Okay. When it talks about offenses and violations up here in the first verse, it's not made super duper clear what exactly that means. I suppose it could be things related to, improper handling or usage of things within the tabernacle. Could also be any kind of sinful acts conducted therein. It's not made real clear, but ultimately I would figure they kind of assume ultimate responsibility for any and all of that. Footnote there just says Tabernacle of the Testimony instead of the Covenant. Again, just different ways of referring to the same thing. Footnote there says Tent of Meeting instead of Tabernacle. A similar idea. But, yeah, so once again, God kind of reaffirming that. So, the Levites, the tribe of which Aaron is part of, they're responsible for helping to take care of the tabernacle and those kinds of things. But specifically, Aaron and his descendants, his direct bloodline, are the ones in charge of the priesthood. Anyway, moving on to verse 5. "You yourselves must perform the sacred duties inside the sanctuary and at the altar. If you follow these instructions, the Lord's anger will never again blaze against the people of Israel. I myself have chosen your fellow Levites from among the Israelites to be your special assistants. They are a gift to you, dedicated to the Lord for service in the tabernacle. But you and your sons, the priests, must personally handle all the priestly rituals associated with the altar and with everything behind the inner curtain. I am giving you the priesthood as your special privilege of service. Any unauthorized person who comes too near the sanctuary will be put to death. Yeah, so even if, like, they don't cause, someone else to go in, like, the inner curtain, they're still in a way kind of responsible for that. So again, it said earlier, if anyone else goes near the sacred objects or the altar, both that person and, it says you in this case, I assume that just refers to the priests kind of in a general sense, to keep that as a rule in perpetuity. So, the priest would die for, failing to uphold their duties, as well as, of course, the person committing whatever offense. So, yeah, so the Levites basically get the privilege of helping in the tabernacle, but Aaron and the priests, Aaron and his sons, and their continued line get the specific responsibility and privilege of the priesthood, which, of course, carries with it a bunch of additional regulations, restrictions, responsibilities. But yeah. So, the priest must personally handle all the priestly rituals associated with the altar. Assuming, because wasn't there technically more than one altar? Wasn't there like an incense altar and then there was the altar for sacrifices? I don't know. Either way. Might even be both, because the incense altar was inside the inner curtain, but the one for the offerings wasn't. So, could in a sense be both. The outer altar where, all the sacrifices were made might be the altar it's referring to there. Okay. Then we get to verse 8. The Lord gave these further instructions to Aaron. I myself have put you in charge of all the holy offerings that are brought to me by the people of Israel. I have given all these consecrated offerings to you and your sons as your permanent share. You are allotted the portion of the most holy offerings that is not burned on the fire. This portion of all the most holy offerings, including the grain offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings, will be most holy, and it belongs to you and your sons. You must eat it as a most holy offering. All the males may eat of it, and you must treat it as most holy. Man, the word holy appears in there a lot. But, repetition, just driving home the point of its significance. So, I don't know if it's specifically saying that only the grain offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings are the ones that they get portions of. It's maybe not. I'm not sure that's really the big thing to focus on there. But, as part of being involved in the priesthood, and this was one of the most significant ways that the priests wound up getting their food. Because, they're constantly in charge of these offerings and serving in the tabernacle and all that kind of stuff. And, they don't necessarily have time to go out and tend fields like others might be able to do. And so to offset that lack of ability to make their own food, they get some from the offerings. Anyway, verse 11. All the sacred offerings and special offerings presented to me when the Israelites lift them up before the altar also belong to you. I have given them to you and to your sons and daughters as your permanent share. Any member of your family who is ceremonially clean may eat of these offerings. Okay, so there's a bit of a differentiation there. I guess these kinds of offerings, it was only really the priests themselves who could eat of those. But some of these other types of offerings that might be given, portions from those could be eaten by anyone in their families who was clean. Because if they were unclean, then by touching and consuming parts of the offering, they've essentially made the offering itself unclean in a way, even though they get that after the whole offering's been made. But it's there are very strict purity standards involved with that. So that kind of clears up some of what I was wondering and questioning in that earlier section. Verse 12. I also give you the harvest gifts brought by the people as offerings to the Lord, the best of the olive oil, new wine, and grain. All the first crops of their land that the people present to the Lord belong to you. Any member of your family who is ceremonially clean may eat this food. Everything in Israel that is specially set apart for the Lord also belongs to you. So yeah, that's a big part of how they got their portions and kind of really even made their living. Footnote there at Lord. Hebrew term used here refers to the complete consecration of things or people to the Lord, either by destroying them or by giving them as an offering. Okay, there was stuff about this in a previous chapter. I forget all the details, but this was a specific thing where people could set stuff aside as giving it to God. I forget all the details of that, so forgive me for not being able to explain much more on that and what that meant, but hopefully you can go back and find the previous chapter that applies to. So, yeah. Again, more things from the offerings that are given to specifically the priests and their families. It hasn't really said anything going to the Levites more generally speaking, because I guess, the Levites weren't necessarily all, quite as heavily tied to serving in the tabernacle. Okay. Moving on to verse 15. The firstborn of every mother, whether human or animal, that is offered to the Lord will be yours. But you must always redeem your firstborn sons and the firstborn of ceremonially unclean animals. Redeem them when they are 1 month old. The redemption price is 5 pieces of silver, as measured by the weight of the sanctuary shekel, which equals 20 gerahs. Hebrews said 5 shekels instead of pieces of silver. Yeah. So, when it says you here, is it talking specifically about the priests and their families, or... Because I thought that sort of applied to everybody. And that was part of the whole, like, exchange of, okay, well, rather than having all your firstborns end up being dedicated to God, you know, you get the priests get the service of the Levites in place of that. But they still were supposed to pay some sort of redemption price for firstborn sons. I guess in order to, you know, continue that exchange in a way. That actually first came up before the Levites were dedicated, so I'm a little unsure of what exactly was meant to cover for which thing, but I mean, just giving up your firstborn sons was not an ideal practice, because then they would be, like, you know, removed from their families, essentially. Anyway, I digress. So, and they only had to redeem unclean animals because the clean ones were actually fit, you know, for use as offerings and whatnot. The unclean ones, however, were not fit for such things, which is why those would have to be redeemed as well, because they couldn't be offered up. Anyway, verse 17. However, you may not redeem the firstborn of cattle, sheep, or goats. They are holy and have been set apart for the Lord. Sprinkle their blood on the altar and burn their fat as a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. The meat of these animals will be yours, just like the breast and right thigh that are presented by lifting them up as a special offering before the altar. Yes, I am giving you all these holy offerings that the people of Israel bring to the Lord. They are for you and your sons and daughters, to be eaten as your permanent share. This is an eternal and unbreakable covenant between the Lord and you, and it also applies to your descendants. Okay, so that kind of explained a little bit more of what I was talking about with, you know, firstborn animals being offered up rather than being redeemed by paying a certain price. And because I said all that before, I don't really need to say too much about that now. Footnote there says a covenant of salt rather than an unbreakable covenant, I guess. Interesting. I wonder if, you know, the phrase covenant of salt was meant just to convey a similar meaning. Because otherwise that doesn't make much sense to have a translation like that. But also I would be totally unsure what covenant of salt would mean otherwise. So I'm kind of glad it goes with this instead of whatever might have been more word for word accurate to the original. So, then we get to verse 20. And the Lord said to Aaron, "You priests will receive no allotment of land or share of property among the people of Israel. I am your share and your allotment. As for the tribe of Levi, your relatives, I will compensate them for their service in the tabernacle. Instead of an allotment of land, I will give them the tithes from the entire land of Israel." So, whenever they ultimately settled in the promised land, each tribe got a certain bit of land in that area, except for the priests and the Levites, because rather than having their own land where they could, raise animals and grow crops, they were supposed to be, committed to God and to the tabernacle of the Lord. So they instead got all the portions from these offerings and dedications and whatnot so that they could still, survive. Verse 22. From now on, no Israelites except priests or Levites may approach the tabernacle. If they come too near, they will be judged guilty and will die. Only the Levites may serve at the tabernacle, and they will be held responsible for any offenses against it. This is a permanent law for you to be observed from generation to generation. The Levites will receive no allotment of land among the Israelites, because I have given them the Israelites' tithes, which have been presented as sacred offerings to the Lord. This will be the Levites' share. That is why I said they would receive no allotment of land among the Israelites. So there was kind of a questioning before, because after the events of Korah's rebellion and, the rebellious leaders getting consumed by fire and all those kinds of things, there was question of anybody really being able to get close to the tabernacle. And I think this kind of explains how things were to work from then on with regards to who could go in the tabernacle and all that. So hopefully that kind of alleviated some of the fears of the people, because up until then, they were kind of wondering, well, wait, doesn't that mean we're all going to die? Because we're supposed to go to the tabernacle to present our offerings. But if we can't go in the tabernacle to present our offerings, that, either we're going to die because we're not making the proper offerings for our sins, or we're going to go to the tabernacle and we're going to die because we got too close to the tabernacle. So I think this is kind of explaining all of that and how it was going to work. Or at least it helps to explain that. Anyway, verse 25. The Lord also told Moses, give these instructions to the Levites. When you receive from the people of Israel the tithes I have assigned as your allotment, give a tenth of the tithes you receive, a tithe of a tithe, to the Lord as a sacred offering. The Lord will consider this offering to be your harvest offering, as though it were the first grain from your own threshing floor or wine from your own winepress. You must present 1/10 of the tithe received from the Israelites as a sacred offering to the Lord. This is the Lord's sacred portion, and you must present it to Aaron the priest. Be sure to give to the Lord the best portions of the gifts given to you. So, the broader, populace of the Israelites were supposed to give, the first of their crops and things like that as offerings to the Lord. Those actually wound up going to the Levites, but the Levites were not immune from presenting offerings to the Lord. In fact, they had an even higher, responsibility in a way, and, all the more reason to set an example. So, with that in mind, the 10% or whatever first offerings that they got from the rest of the Israelites, they were supposed to give a tenth of those to the Lord. Specifically, the best tenth, because really that was, what they had gotten from the other Israelites was supposed to be the best that the other people had to offer. Okay, verse 30, and then we'll wrap up the chapter. Also, give these instructions to the Levites. When you present the best part as your offering, it will be considered as though it came from your own threshing floor or winepress. You Levites and your families may eat this food anywhere you wish, for it is your compensation for serving in the tabernacle. You will not be considered guilty for accepting the Lord's tithes if you give the best portion to the priests. Be careful not to treat the holy gifts of the people of Israel as though they were common. If you do, you will die. Okay, sorry, not 100% sure what that last bit means, but I guess because the priests were even further set apart, from the broader group of Levites, then the priests, in order to receive their portions, were supposed to get, part of the tithe that was given by the Levites, which was already coming from the tithe of the rest of the Israelites. So the fact that this sentence about not treating the holy gifts as they were common, the fact that that comes after the sentence about, giving the best portion to the priests, that makes me think, God's kind of trying to reaffirm that, yes, I realize all that you're giving is supposed to be the best from the rest of the people, but you then need to be giving the best of the best. If you treat all of it like it's the same, then you're not giving your best, and you'll, God knows everything, so you will be guilty in God's eyes nonetheless. Yes, it's all the best from the general populace, but you're still supposed to set the example and then give the best of the best. Anyway, okay. I think that's going to do it for chapter 18. Alright, so I guess with the Levites reestablished, as the selected helpers in the tabernacle, just kind of going back over some of their responsibilities, and the priests, as well as what they got out of the portions of the other people's offerings. Anyway, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description to get info on other social media pages, and leave comments below there with any thoughts you have. So that's it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.